Gaslighting is a pretty popular term. I'm sure we've all heard it used at one point or another, but we may not all be using it properly, and it doesn't apply to every situation. However, it is a common experience for all narcissistic abuse victims. Welcome to Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. In this episode, we're going to be discussing what gaslighting actually is and how it shows up in toxic relationships. We'll also talk about when the first symptoms of narcissism often presents, and does that happen in childhood? And if it's so, what should we do about it? And we'll also address how to handle our children's confusion when there is an uninvolved or an absent parent. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy, a mental health specialist with over 20 years of counseling experience and a narcissistic abuse survivor. Please leave a review and let us know what you think of the show. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and consider donating the cost of a cup of coffee in your show of support of helping us set abuse victims free from toxic relationships. So let's listen in to this episode of a TikTok replay. I've been thinking a lot about gaslighting. How many of us have experienced gaslighting? It's crazy making, isn't it? It's a good way for somebody to make the issue you instead of making the issue. People do it for lots of reasons. I mean, the original story came out of the movie Gaslighting in the 1940s, where there was a con artist who hid jewelry in a house, and he wanted access to the house. I don't remember if he actually married the heiress or if he just pretended to get engaged, but he pretended to have a romantic relationship with her in order to facilitate access to the house. He then began to make her think she's going crazy so that he would have full access to the house, and began to search for the jewelry. Fortunately, she got smart and involved a police officer, a constable or a detective, to look into the situation, and he realized the rest of the situation, and then they set up, the con artist got set up, which protected her. But that was really where the term gaslighting came from. It came from the con artist would use the lighting in the house. They were gas lights, and he would make them flicker as a way for her to think that she was seeing things. He would say he didn't see the lights flickering. She was seeing things. And then she was thinking she was going crazy, which then would help her be able to be institutionalized. But gaslighting is subtle. It's not always that obvious as flickering lights or people actually making us feel crazy. Sometimes gaslighting happens in a much more subtle way, like just us saying no is being met with obstinance. A friend of mine this morning sent me a text message where somebody wanted to come over and see her. She didn't want this person stopping by. This person wanted to bring some food. So instead of saying upright, I don't want the food, or I'm sorry, I don't want to see you, she said, I'm not hungry. And they said, you mean you don't eat? Well, no, I eat, but I'm not hungry. But the issue was she didn't want this person to stop by. Isn't it interesting? First of all, I want to stop and take a moment on that. Isn't it interesting how often we take care of the emotional feelings of someone else? The bigger issue here was there was a relationship problem, but she didn't feel a freedom to say, I don't feel comfortable seeing you. You and I are not okay, so please don't stop by. She made it the issue about hunger when the issue wasn't hunger because it wasn't safe enough to say the honest issue. So there's the first thing that happens, is that there are people in our lives who can't hear our boundaries. And when we set up a boundary, then they end up attacking us. So what we do, and because we don't like that, is then we change the issue into something else in order for it to be more palatable so we don't hurt their feelings. Like as if we're going to avoid the drama by making it another issue, but it really doesn't, because it still becomes drama regardless of what you do. Well, what happens is the person begins to push her. You mean you never get hungry? Why would you not get hungry? Did you eat this morning? I mean, all these questions. Now, does the individual who's pushing not get that the first person doesn't want them stopping by? Yes, they know. They know. Come on, we're not dummies here. We're all adults. We can read the tea leaves. We understand that. But the playing dumb was the bigger issue. The playing dumb was as a way to manipulate and push the person into the corner to have to get more specific, and maybe even to force it into a crisis, into a big fight or some kind. So that's what happened. It ends up be the original person who's saying, I don't want you coming over, who's saying, I'm not hungry, ends up capitulating and the person stops by in order to avoid a worse thing, which would have been possibly domestic violence or a big argument or something else. It reminded me of one of my situations. This is how it happened to me. I was in a relationship, my second relationship. I was widowed and I married a narcissistic sociopath, and he liked to open the doors. He saw that as his being a gentleman. He said he was really a gentleman. Now, my hips were starting to fail. Both hips of mine were having spurs, were building up around them in order to keep the socket, the hip joint, in the socket. So as they were getting weaker, I'm then having to use more of my knees to lift. And getting out of a car, if you ever think about it, next time you get out of a car, think about it, how hard it is to leverage. You're doing a lot of shoving with your quads and your upper thighs and your hips. If you don't have that, what happens? You have to rely on your knees to pull you up into a position. So if someone's taking you by the hand to lift you out, that then means you can't use your hands to shove yourself out of the car, and you're forcing even more effort in your knees and your hips to get up. It was a setup for disaster. I finally said, I can't do this. I have to get myself out of the car. Oh, yeah, you're just so independent, being stubborn again, never let me help you. Instead of seeing the fact that he was actually going to tear my knees up if I continued to let this happen. So all of this, even though we don't call this gaslighting, it's a form of gaslighting. And here's why. Let me tell you why it's a form of gaslighting. It's a form of gaslighting because instead of dealing with the issue, which is for this person of, I'm not comfortable around you, you don't make me feel safe, I don't want you stopping by, they don't deal with it, and they're dealing with the topic of food. And in my case, the form of gaslighting was, hey, I'm having problems, but your ego needs to help me. The way to really help me is to please let me get myself out of the car alone. Instead, it makes it out, I'm difficult, I'm the problem. She was the problem for letting her friend stop by with a bagel or whatever. That they make it you for not taking whatever it is they're wanting to give you or wanting to have go their way. They make you the problem instead of listening to you, valuing your feelings. So what does it look like in a healthy relationship? In a healthy relationship, if you said, hey, I'm too busy, please don't stop by, you, as the person who's asking, would say, oh, okay, sorry. Is there something else I could do to help? No, I've got it. Thanks for asking, maybe another time. What do you do in the case of my situation about the car and my hips? Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that when I'm trying to help, I'm making it worse. Well, I don't want to make it worse. Hey, sweetie, I'm sorry about that. And you would back off. So watch for that. Watch for when people manipulate you in making you be bad or difficult or not nice or whatever, when the bigger issue is their inability to take a no and their inability to have their offer declined. That's the issue here. That's the issue. Have you guys heard of the term ambient abuse? Ambient abuse is when you're in a relationship with somebody who needs to control and manipulate the relationship for their own sense of safety. And so what they do is then they lock down everything related to the relationship. They control how your time is spent. Maybe they control about how much food is in the house or when you guys are eating or what you're eating. They may control the amount of sleep that you're getting. They also often it's easy for them to control finances. And so they'll do various setups in order for you to have less and less control of your finances. It can take on as many forms as there are us, how it looks. But it comes back to, let me ask you some tough questions. And I know because I'm a victim of narcissistic abuse myself, so I understand, and I was being financially abused, so I understand the nuances of it and how it felt. Mine was kind of an odd situation in the sense it wasn't typical, like I wasn't working and didn't have the money, but whether he did it in a different way that kind of manipulated me and sort of put me in a terrible bind. So here's the challenge I found that was really hard for me. I agreed to things that weren't good for me. I knew that some of the things he was requesting put me into a position of feeling uncomfortable. My gut was saying, whoa, I don't know about this. And as a result, instead of following my gut, I went ahead and tried to preserve the relationship. So I preserved the relationship over my own safety and my own needs. Now that's a tricky line. How do we walk the connection between really caring for a partner and wanting things to be done in a way that makes them feel valuable, seen and important, that also at the same time, and respectful, but also at the same time respect us. We don't want to be controlling people either, but if you're in a situation where you know that it puts you at a severe disadvantage, so often many of us, especially women, I'm not saying it doesn't happen to men, but especially women, we get into a situation where we agree to stay home. We agree to maybe commingle our finances. We agree to these things that we know that potentially if things go wrong and this person begins to try to lock us out or control us, we're going to be in trouble. So now once it happens, it happens. It's very hard to change those things. But if you're getting into a situation and you're creating a home or a relationship with someone, really be mindful to always keep track of your own autonomy and to control the things that you can control of. I'm not one who's big pro on separate accounts. I don't really think that's necessarily helpful for relationships. But if there's something about this that you're making you feel safe, that may be even a pause on the relationship and maybe be giving you enough warning that you need to slow down and look at who this person is and why are you having these reservations. Now, if you're in a situation where it's already happened and we can't go back in time, that's what happened to me. I couldn't go back in time. Once I discovered that what was done, I couldn't undo it very easily. I would really recommend that you begin to get a long view. I know this is not easy. You already know. If you're asking me about financial abuse and how to become financially solvent, or not solvent, but independent enough to be able to live on your own or go out on your own, you already know because you've already looked at all these situations that it is not that simple. It's going to take a lot of hard work. So anything I say, I don't have any magic answers. I really wish I did, but it's going to take a lot of work on your part for you to begin to find a way for you to become financially autonomous. And I would urge you to do that, really urge you to do that. I know for me, when I left that situation, I had no home, I had no car, I had no furnishings. I had to literally start over. Now, yeah, I had money, so that made it easier, but my child was dying in the hospital, leukemia. So, I was trying to set up a home, at the same time be at the hospital every single day. So it was very, very difficult. It's really, really tough. So I know I get asked all the time about this issue. What do we do? What do we do? I don't have a job and I can't get out and I don't have access to the checking account and I don't even know how much money there is and I don't know how much money he makes. And this is a very common problem. So what I would urge you to do is take it step by step, start working your way out. It's going to take time. Have the long view. This is a marathon run that we're going to be doing, a marathon run. If you're starting a relationship and you have reservations and you're starting to think, maybe I shouldn't do all of this, I would question the healthiness of the relationship. Maybe this is not the healthiest relationship. So that's financial abuse. How do you help children whose father or mother has walked away and doesn't do anything and any efforts to see this person? What do you do about that? How do you cope? How do you help your children cope, who you're obviously hurting for, who now is living without that other parent and doesn't have enough maturity to understand that their father or mother is a very challenging person or in trouble? First of all, my heart grieves for you. My heart really, really grieves for you. I think that's the first piece of this is working on the grief of it. Your child's hurting. And often, by the way, as a person who's lost many people in my lives, including my first husband, to death, grief often has a lot of rage with it. I didn't know that. No one ever told me that grief, one of the primary feelings of grief is rage. I was very, very angry at the world, very angry at what happened to me. So if you see your children very angry, I would interpret that as probably grief. They're processing their loss. And they're mad at the unfairness. That's how it felt to me. Mad, angry about the unfairness. And I had a lot of envy and jealousy of other people's situations. So I would anticipate that that's what you're seeing and put it into words for them. This is how I would do it. I would say things like, I'm sorry, Daddy or Mommy's not here. I know you really wanted them to see your game today. Or I know you really wanted to show them your report card. Or I know you wanted them at show and tell today. It does suck. I'm sorry. That must hurt to have the other kids, both parents there, and both of us not being there for you. And then just sit there quietly and let them cry about that. We don't need to fix it. It's what's real. It's what's really actually happening. Now you're helping them to know it's okay to have the feeling. It's not too big for you to talk about, and that there's space for it. That this is a normal reaction. And while you're giving them a chance to process it, you're doing something really wonderful when you do that. Then the next thing I would do is I would say to them, is there something that we can do that will help? I can't make this person come back into your life the way that you want, But are there other things that we can do to help you so that it doesn't quite feel so bad? Maybe there's something that they know about show and tell they could do differently. I don't know. But at least you're allowing them to kind of process out loud with you to say, well, maybe the next time if this happened, it might help or be a little bit better. Or, maybe if we could tape it, then I would have a record of it. And someday if I ever see them, I could show it to them. I don't know, but at least it helps them think out of the box and thinks another way. It gives them a little more control over the situation. The reality is that we can't make people who are not in the picture be in the picture. And we can't fix the brokenheartedness of our children. And we can't be both parents for them. We can't. But you at least giving them the space to say these things and to hurt really goes a long way in healing. It really does. It goes a long ways. Are you looking for help? Maybe you're feeling really alone and isolated. I know that I had never felt more on my own when I was in the middle of that narcissistic abusive relationship. Having the help of a supportive community is one of the leading predictors of good recovery. I have just the solution. Come join me in my Toxic Free Relationship Club. It's a private premium group that encourages and challenges each other. For $7 a month, you can get round-the-clock support while you meet other survivors. I lead group discussions and do check-ins. To learn more, check out the link in the show notes. And in fact, if you sign up, there's a coupon code for $3 off for your first 3 months. I can't wait to see you over there. How early does narcissism start? And how do you stop your children from becoming narcissistic? I want to say something that I'm really uncomfortable with. Boy, I'm hesitant of whether I want to go on record saying this. It's research-based, so why am I nervous about it? I'll tell you why I'm nervous telling you this, because I don't want you using the information wrong. And I've seen a lot of people use it wrong. As a therapist, who is, by the way, one of the things I'm a child psychologist. I had a lot of training working with kids and teenagers, and so I've seen a lot of parents who do things pretty messed up. So I'm nervous to give you this information because I don't want you to hurt your children. So please hear me ahead of time. You are never to say this to your kid. Not ever. Not ever. But I was listening to Dr. Gregory Lester. He was part of the DSM-5 committee group working on the narcissistic personality disorder and personality disorder traits in general. Personality traits are a disorder, not a condition. It is not something that happens to you. It is something that you are. It's a lack of flexibility and adaptability in your personality traits. That means when you were born and created, and by the way, I now also know if the word is in, we know what causes narcissism. It's genetics. 80% of it is genetics. They've done twin studies. Dr. Lester said that the research is so solid and there's such a volume of research that verifies this. It is not trauma. It is not bad childhood. It is not attachment problems. It is genetics. You're born this way. You're born this way. So something's happened. You're born this way. You're missing key traits that help you be adaptable and flexible in the challenges of life. So you approach life with a fixed way of being that doesn't work across the board. Narcissists have problems not being in control and not being right. Their ego is fragile enough because of this loss, and it actually shows up on brain imaging. The loss shows up, it's neurological loss, that as a result, they have a hard time. They don't have the wherewithal, the strength, the ego strength to not be in control and not always be right. It shows up as early as 5 to 8 years old. So here's how to know the difference. Because stages of childhood have periods that are difficult. Ask yourself this question. Is this something new? Is my kid doing something new that I've seen and boy, this new age is really driving me nuts. Since they turned whatever age, they have become a pistol. That's not narcissism. That's just developmental process. But if you said, they've always been this way, they were born like this, it's always been challenging, you have probably somebody who's got a problem with not having all the strengths that they need with their personality. They're having problems coping socially and with growth and handling failure and knowing how to meet needs and contain their impulses and modulate their emotions and all the things that we need to know, control impulses and handle boredom, all the things that we need to know they're having problems with. So how do you do that? What do you do when you discover when you see somebody who's showing traits of hardwiring problems in their brain? And what I do not want you saying, which is why I really hesitated so long, yeah, I'll tell you, Junior, you've always been narcissistic. I knew that. We've always had a handful with you. You've been a really one narcissistic dude or narcissistic girl. No, do not say that. That is, first of all, how's that help? It's abusive. And all it does is it labels someone and doesn't give them any resources. It's just your rage, your insecurity that you're now acting out on one of your kids. And I don't want you doing that. I've seen parents do that. It doesn't help. All it does is pathologize the child. What you need to do is help them learn to compensate for the loss, the lack of flexibility and adaptability that they have. What I would do is I run practice, and I had one of my kids who showed some sign of narcissism. Narcissism runs in my family. I would fit that. I could point to you people through the generations who's been narcissistic in my family. I saw it showing up in one of my kids. What I did is I actively worked on reflection and I actively worked on cognitive empathy. So what I would do is this. I would say when my child would show up and they would tell me a story, I would say, well, how would that make you feel if that happened to you? And then I'd make them tell me, well, I would feel this way. Or we'd watch TV and I would pause the TV because we DVR or we can because of streaming and say, all right, that situation, let's talk about that situation. What is each person feeling and what might happen based upon what we're watching happening? And what could we do differently to help avoid it? By the way, this is what clinicians do as a way to get better at therapy. We do that. Sometimes we get permission of the client. We tape a session, go back, watch it, and then ask ourselves what's happening that we're missing. So, it's a really helpful technique is to pause. And another thing you can do is to pause the tape and say, what is each person feeling? Get them to begin to get really good at identify feeling. So you can work on these skills. It's very possible to grow things. So imagine, for example, you were born without an arm and a hand. That doesn't mean that person's life is ruined. It means you're going to teach them how to live life with a prosthesis, a stand-in for that arm and that hand. They're going to learn new ways to work around it. And that's what you're going to do. If you see this trait showing up on one of your children, you're going to teach them how to compensate and work around it by teaching them skill sets like observation and analysis, like running scenarios and fantasy and putting themselves in the position, having them practice taking turns. All these things, or when they're out of control and emotional, getting really good at learning how to use natural consequences. One of the techniques I really love for behavioral discipline is, I don't know if it's still around and popular, but it was when I was raising kids, is love and logic, where you use natural consequences as a way to help people experience the cost of their bad decisions. So that's my answer. And I'm nervous to have you tell you this. That's why I've not made a video about it and put it up, because I'm not really ready to tell the whole world, by the way, we know as young as 5 to 8 that you're going to be narcissistic, and it's already genetic. So based upon your born, the die is cast on you. So, but that doesn't mean, and by the way, all my sons are now adults. And the tendency I was seeing in the one that I saw in is really mild now. It does not meet the DSM-5 criteria for narcissism, not at all. There is a lot of empathy and a lot of sensitivity. In fact, this person just recently said, hey, you've been going through a lot. How are you doing? How many men do you know do that, let alone somebody that I saw that was very narcissistic as a kid? So I believe it's possible to really help somebody move through this and learn new skill sets. If somebody would like me to talk about borderline personality disorder, absolutely, let's talk about that. So borderline personality disorder is, and this is how Dr. Lester characterizes that one, it's a chronically unstable personality. So regulation is a big issue. Regulation or emotional dysregulation is common. Borderline personality disorder is a chronic dysregulation of emotions. It's a very challenging disorder, and they struggle with relationships are really scary for them because they feel things really intensely, and then they may be kind of impulsive, and they worry then if their impulsivity or what they say, or even the intense feeling they have for you. And by the way, they develop relationship really fast, and they feel really big and intimate. I've met them, and it feels wonderful when you meet a borderline personality disorder because they make fast friends and they do it really well. And you feel this incredible, like, symbiotic connection with them. And no, they're not love bombing. That's not what's happening. It's just that they feel intensely. Why wouldn't we want to be loved? And they love fast and love big. But what happens is that it's really challenging to hold on to their feelings. And when they get scared, they get really scared. And when they're overwhelmed, they get really overwhelmed. And managing all of that and staying on top of it is tough. So they act out a lot. So they end up, losing their temper or blurting things out that they shouldn't. And so it gets really challenging to manage relationships when that's happening. And as a result, they also then get really afraid that you're going to leave them or get really afraid that you're going to take control and take over them. And they don't want either. They don't want you to engulf them, swallow them up, but they also don't want you walking out on them. And it gets super, super scared. So what happens, they get quite manipulative as a way to manage all of this, which is sad. I would really recommend the best treatment program for borderline personality disorder. And I had a client that I worked with for a long-term basis who had a pretty significant BPD. She also was having DID, dissociative identity disorder. She did dialectic behavioral therapy, and I highly recommend that. That's Marsha Linehan's program. It's like a big commitment. You would get into it like a year, and it's usually individual plus group therapy at the same time, and they teach you self-care management tools like how to handle emotions, how to regulate your internal experiences, how to regulate relationships. So they teach you all of this. And I would really recommend that. I think that that's gone a long ways to being very, very helpful. Cognitive behavioral therapy, yeah, that is good too. I haven't seen as much success with that with borderline personality disorder, but I think that's a very solid treatment, definitely. I know that borderlines get maligned a lot, and well, so do narcissists. Borderlines tend to be more often women. Narcissists more often tend to be men. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why that is. But it is really interesting. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was an interesting episode. I'd be curious to hear what you think about when narcissism first makes its appearance. Is that something you've seen in terms of your own family? Drop me a note and let me know. One of the best ways to heal after narcissistic abuse is to find support. So many of my friends didn't know what to say. They acted edgy or even dismissive. That's why I'm thrilled to be hosting the Toxic Free Relationship Club with its chat circles, messaging, video meetings. In fact, we just launched a new mental health challenge where we're practicing showing ourselves good self-care. Too many times, abuse victims get used to deprivation and neglect, and without realizing it, we start to do it to ourselves. So consider joining my group. You get $3 off the cost of the first 3 months membership fee with the coupon code HEALNOW22. And until Thursday, I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.